I kind of want to start at the very beginning. I've watched a couple of interviews that you've done as well recently, and I wanted to ask why now was the right time to write a book. I know that you said that a couple artists, especially Corey Taylor, was pushing you and pushing you and pushing you, asking you when you were writing a book, when you were writing a book. Why was it now the right time to write this?
You know, I think the right time to write it would have been any time in the last 10 years. It's out now because I finally got around to finishing it and getting it published. I make reference in the postface of the book how my late mother, who was an antique book dealer, started telling me when I was a teenager. She said, listen, you're going to want to write books one day. You've got to keep a journal. You're never going to remember all this. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll remember everything. What an asshole I was. Because I would have had the material for several books by now a long time ago. But
sure.
It's just out now because I finally got around to it.
How long did it take to do? I mean, I would assume it made it easier that it wasn't necessarily like an autobiographical. It is and it isn't. You start out the book that way a little bit, but it's a collection of stories with your experiences. So I would assume that made it a little bit easier to flow and write here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of designed that way, in particular to that first chapter, which is entitled The Time I Attended My First Concert and Threw Up on Carlos Sanchez.
Yep.
Which was December 76, Madison Square Garden, New York City, Black Sabbath and Ted Nugent. I didn't want to do a full, here's my life, here's my struggle kind of thing. But I realized that for people to get invested in the book, I needed to give them background on me, and the easiest place to start was my first concert and giving some background about where I grew up, which was Englishtown, New Jersey, and that gave, I think, enough for everything. But yeah, then the rest of the book, like you pointed out, it's all unrelated stories. They are all standalone stories. Each chapter, you can read it in any order you want because, again, much like if we were hanging out together and in the catering area of a festival and we're in between bands, how we would naturally trade rock and roll war stories. It's like that. The stories jump around. There's no chronological order or anything. They're just random stories that sort of jump out. And I wrote the ones that came easiest to me. In some cases, they were the ones that both longtime listeners of mine and longtime industry friends who had heard me tell these stories before, they were the ones that people were like, you've got to put that in the book. Well, you've got to put that in the book. But there's certainly enough for at least another book as good as the first one, and maybe another one after that. But I think maybe I've got one really good book left in me in that style.
Well, anybody who does what you do or what I do, because I do interviews, concert photography, all that stuff. We've all had those festivals where we're standing in the media tent catering, in the photo pit, and there's really not a lot to do in between bands. So, what have you been up to? What happened at this show? Or, well, let me tell you what happened at this show that wasn't supposed to happen. Or, we've all had those moments where it's like you said, trading stories, that we've all had from the last time we saw each other to now. So it's really cool to see those kind of in written form, because I have a list of, when something fun or crazy happens, I'll write it down so that, if I ever get around to doing what you did, I'll remember what's happened, because I don't remember everything, just like I can't remember everything. It's impossible. You can't.
Yeah, one thing that helped me, since I did not have the journal that my mom had long ago urged me to keep, I have kept all of the ticket stubs, set lists, passes, sticky passes, laminates, and after 3,000 shows, it adds up to a lot of stuff. I think my memorabilia is well over 10,000 pieces. So one of the things that I was able to go back to that sort of shook memories alive again was going through all that stuff, and much of it is cataloged already by me, and I keep huge Excel spreadsheets of, I've got 1,100 billion guitar picks, and
Yep.
so you start going through stuff, and it's like, oh yes, I was here for that, and I was here for that. That was a great help.
Yeah, and it's one thing one thing that really stood out to me is it was really good for me to read that there's somebody else besides me who is a non-inked, non-pierced person in metal. You don't see that very often.
Yeah.
Does that give you more of like a talking point? And I feel like it makes me stand out more, and it's a good like jumping point for a lot of people. Is like, why don't you have any tattoos? Why don't you have any piercings? And it opens a lot of doors right there to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, for me, maybe not so much. I talk about it if people point it out to me. They're like, hey, man, you got any ink? Or, hey, I noticed you don't have any ink. You don't have any piercings, which, in the rock and roll world is a pretty rare thing now.
It is.
I always kid people that, when I was a kid, only outlaws were covered in ink and piercings. It's taken 40 years, but now who's the outlaw now? Who's the only one who stands out? Who's the only one who's different?
Right.
And again, I don't judge. I mean, I just never really saw any artwork that I thought, yes, I want that indelibly upon my skin for all of eternity. I think if I had to pick something, maybe I would go with, there's a great artist whose work I collect, Edward Gorey, and I met him once too. But I collect his books and prints and original artwork. Either Edward Gorey or one of the artists who, oh God, what is his name now? Who has done a lot of the artwork the last couple of decades for the J.R.R. Tolkien, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and other books. His stuff is great, but Lord knows if anybody could take his watercolors and turn it into anything tattooable.
Right.
But that's how it is. And again, I love tattoos and I love tattoo art. I just, never went under the needle myself.
Yeah, I love looking at other people's tattoos and ink, and there's some that I'm just floored by, like that is so cool, but I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's never been just appealed to something that I wanted to personally do myself. I'm also kind of afraid of needles, so that's probably part of it too. But yeah. I mean, I love just like when a good tattoo is good, it's amazing. There's some good ones out there.
By the way, the artist I was talking about was Alan Lee.
Okay.
And there have been a ton of great artists who have brought Tolkien's, or Tolkien, I should say, Tolkien's work to life. But Alan Lee is certainly my favorite. I don't know if he's the best, but he's my favorite.
So obviously Corey Taylor wrote the foreword for the book, and I know you guys go way back, and you have lots of stories with him. But was there anybody else that you had in mind to write that? Did you kind of put feelers out saying, hey, I'm writing this book? Who would want to write the foreword? Do you go directly straight to Corey?
No, it was always Corey. And part of that, it had to be Corey for a lot of reasons. One of which, out of all of the people I've met, which is a pretty substantial amount of artists and interesting creative people, Corey is one I consider an actual friend. I like anybody else, I know a lot of people, but I don't have a ton of friends.
Yeah.
But I consider Corey one. He's also a great writer, so I knew he could write a great foreword. But also, it's as you touched on before, he was one of the people who encouraged me to write the book, and sometimes he would do it, in sort of Corey motherfucking Taylor style, where he would goof on me and bust my balls. But on a number of occasions, he was like, dude, you have got, he was very serious and very sincere, and said, listen, you have a great book in you, at least one. He goes, you have all of these stories. They need to be told. And he said, you'll be a great writer. Just sit down and do it. So it was out of one of those conversations. I said, well, if I'm going to finish this fucking book, you're going to write the fucking foreword. He said, fuck you, I'll write the fucking foreword, write the fucking book already. And, it took me long enough, but I finally got it done. And it's out. And again, I'm pleasantly shocked that it's doing so well. To see it for several weeks now, sitting on top of some of the new title charts on Amazon, and a lot of the big retailers have already put in orders for more books, which is again pleasantly shocking. But in the middle of all the rotten things going on, it's certainly welcome to have some good news.
Well, it's something that fans have always, fans get those stories sometimes, sometimes from a lot of people in the music industry, but for somebody like yourself who goes back as far as you do in the music industry, to give fans that inside look at, this is what it was like when, or this is what happened when, or this is what I experienced when. I feel like it's almost a no-brainer for it to be laid out the way it was, and it's not a surprise to me that it's done as well as it has, because fans love hearing. That's one question I get the most: what's your craziest backstage story? I'm like, I don't, like you said, it's not crazy backstage. There's not a lot, but the stuff outside of backstage sometimes can be. So this is just something that fans have always been interested in, is backstage tour stories.
Yeah, and something you mentioned early in that is, I hope the book gives people an honest look at what it's actually like, behind the scenes and all this stuff, be it, concerts, festivals, or hopping on the road with bands, or, what it's like to be in the media and be behind the scenes on all these things. Because, the stories that maybe generate the most talk are some of the crazier ones. But even through all those stories, I try and give people an honest look at what all this is like, because it's like anything else. When you pull the curtain back, it's nothing like you think it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
And in a lot of ways, it's boring and depressing, and it's lunacy and all that. But for lunacy for not the reasons that you would normally think. But it's along with all the crazy stuff, I think that's one of the reasons why people are enjoying it so much. And also it's, the timing of the book coming out, which if you had asked me, would you like the book coming out in the middle of a global fucking pandemic, I'd be like, no, I don't think so. But there was no choice. This thing was coming out. It was being shipped. It was going everywhere it needed to go as the lockdowns started ramping up. And, it was coming out no matter what. And people started pointing out to me, oh my God, this is a perfect time for your book. Everything's so depressing. This is a fun book. I can't go to concerts right now, but I can read about concerts. I'm trapped at home. I need a book to read. And so in some crazy, and I swear to God, it's like I feel guilty saying this stuff. I never would have asked for something like that. But it's just worked out that amidst all of the horrible, horrible things going on, that at least the book is like this ray of sunshine for some people. And that's, I guess, good for the sales, but it makes me feel good just because people are enjoying it, and it's given them a break from everything going on. It's just a weird, weird, weird time to have something out.
It made me chuckle at times, just because I can relate to so many things, especially when you're talking about like with tour managers and the production managers and stuff, sometimes being kind of just like very strict, and sometimes just like dicks sometimes when you're going in, but they're not always that way. Sometimes they do it very well.
Of course not. There's a couple things in the story where, and I don't think anybody, particularly the tour managers, really comes off as a dick in the book. Yes, some tour managers are very stern. They're very strict.
Strict is a better word for it. Very, very like on point scheduled.
But they need to be. They need to be, because, like I know what I'm doing when I go back at these things, and I know there's a code of conduct and what you do and what you don't do. Yeah. They deal with different people every night. Not everybody knows what the code of conduct is, and the code of conduct can change from tour to tour and band to band. So they tell you what you need to know. I never take offense at any of that stuff.
Right.
Now, for me, that happens not so much anymore because, you know, I'm a fairly known quantity in the rock and roll world, and
Right.
most of these people I've dealt with many times through the last several decades. So it, you know, they know I'm not going to do anything stupid, but still there are people who lay down the law with me with stuff. I mean, geez, but it's their job. I mean, I don't take it personally. It's just people getting shit done.
Well, they have so many people trying to get backstage and trying to get close to these artists, and you know, everything is so, like you talked about, on schedule. You even mentioned it at the very beginning. The tour manager is the one. Don't piss him off, because he is in charge of everything. And
sometimes, by the way, sometimes it's a she. There are far more women starting to work now as tour managers and as key crew people, and that's very welcome. And there's a lot of great women who are doing a lot more in management as well. So that is absolutely worth noting.
It is. And if you, in the Motley Crue story you were telling, you know, when you met with them initially, it was very strict. But then when you got off stage, once they kind of realized, you know what you're doing, you're following orders, you know exactly what to do, you do what they say. Once you get in their good graces, you're set. You're good, at least for that show usually.
Yeah, and I mean, again, if they know that you're not gonna rush into the dressing room and steal somebody's underwear or whatever the fuck goes on at some of these things, you know, usually people loosen up just a bit. But a lot of times, you know, you go back, you do whatever you're there to do, and you leave. Now, a lot of bands invite me to hang out because, you know, I know them a long time. There's a lot of bands I don't know all that well. I go back, I do my thing, I shake their hand, I say thank you, and then I go out and watch the show, or I photograph the show, and then I go home. I mean, it's, you know, these people are at work. So you're part of their work day, and nobody likes a task during their work day to go on longer than they thought it would, you know? So, you know, you got to know, even when people invite you to hang out for a while, it's always good to know when to leave. You know, it's the same thing when I go out and travel with bands that I have a good rapport with, and they'll give me a bunk on the bus or a seat on the plane or whatever it is. You know, there's a proper amount of time to stay out on the, even if they say stay as long as you want. Well, you don't want to go out for 3 weeks. You know, go for 3 or 4 shows. You know, go for maybe 5 or 6 days at most. Because after that, you know, it's time to go. You need to go home. You know, they've seen you enough. So
right. And I wanted to ask, when you transitioned and started shooting concerts, kind of for the first time, how long did it really take to get that art down? Because it's shooting concerts can be really hard depending on the venue and the lighting and all of that stuff. It can be very easy and very hard at the same time sometimes.
Yeah, I think shooting live concerts, and again, I don't consider myself any great photographer or professional photographer. My media access through the years has given me the opportunity to take pictures, and it was a number of the bands saying, why don't you take pictures of us? You know, Rancid was one of the first bands that said, well, you know, hey, we see you take pictures of lighthouses. Why don't you bring the camera, take some pictures of the show? The Slipknot and Stone Sour guys did the same thing early on. I had my first digital camera was, I think it was a Canon EOS Rebel. Nice. A Canon Rebel. And you can't really do great concert shots with that, but when if the lights were really bright, I got some decent ones, and I thought, oh, man, this is kind of fun. And it was as I went further down the rabbit hole that, you know, I realized if I was going to get good shots at concerts, I was going to have to invest in better equipment. And at the same time, I started getting opportunities to shoot Major League Baseball down on the field. And for the night games, you absolutely need the big bazooka-sized lenses, the big light bucket lenses. So it all sort of fed off things. And, you know, as the years went on and there was more of an interest to follow bands online and media people like myself online, I found having professional grade photos to post is actually really good.
It helps.
And really helpful, because while everybody else is reposting shit they got from someplace else. I'm like, hey, here's original stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And plus I love it. I mean, the most important thing is I get a great sense of enjoyment out of photography, and not just shooting bands or baseball. I love going to abandoned places. I love astrophotography, and and again, I've been shooting. The first thing I really wanted to take pictures of was lighthouses, and I've done some calendars and stuff, and I've shot lights all over the world, and that when I have the time and I can get to them, that's still one of my favorite things in life to do.
Abandoned photography is one of my favorite things outside of concerts and sports that I do, because for one, right now, you're not going to catch the coronavirus at an abandoned building, probably. And so I've just been going crazy with shooting abandoned buildings, houses, property, anything like that, and it's been a lot of fun. There's so many places in Indiana that are really cool to hit. So I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of my favorite things to do right now. That I just didn't expect would be any fun, but it is.
Yeah. I think as a person gets deeper into photography, I think you just look at things all the time from a perspective of what would this look like as a picture, and I am constantly doing the composure of pictures in my head whenever I walk in a room. I'm like, that would make a good picture. Or if I had my camera, I would shoot it like this. Or, I think the main thing for me is when trying to think of a picture is just how it is composed. And sometimes it trumps focus or light or anything else. A well-composed shot, you can have perfect lighting and perfect everything else, but if the shot is not composed in a particularly compelling way, it's probably not going to be a really great picture. And back to concert photography, I mean, because the lights are constantly changing and everything's moving, and you're only out there usually for 2 or 3 songs. It's really, really tough. I mean, it's more fun for me when it's a band or an artist that I know really well, and they just say, shoot the whole show. There are some bands that, there are quite a few bands who are kind enough to let me do that. Yeah. Some of them I walk on stage right in the middle of the set just to get pictures of the drummer or whatever I'm shooting, or, they want to get shots from behind from the drum riser or whatever it is. That's always fun. There's a great sense of nervousness whenever I do that, because, you don't want to walk off the stage. You don't want to trip and fall and look like a dumbass in front of 15,000 people, and that shit happens, So, and of course, the most important thing is that you don't bump into a musician or knock an amplifier over or hook the laces of your sneakers on the bottom of the cymbal stand and send that crash. It's like, and all this shit happens, so you got to be careful.
So when you're writing these stories out and you're sitting down and remembering how a lot of the stories went, when you get to a story like we talked about earlier with the Slipknot show with Corey Taylor, he's running around basically naked on stage. You're chasing him with the fly swatter on. Do you give some of these artists a heads up that, hey, this story might go in the book, or do you kind of have that relationship and understanding that it's cool?
There's nothing really bad about anybody in the book.
There's really not, no.
And I that was a conscious decision when I sat down and in earnest started to write the book. And it was just a chapter at a time. And I thought, gee, what kind of book do I want to write? And I knew I did not want to write a book that was like a tell-all, embarrass people. I saw so-and-so, cheating on his wife and snorting cocaine and blah, blah, blah. Like, listen, I could probably write a book like that. I could have written a book like that, but I don't want to be an asshole.
Well, and you do a good job about, when you're talking about if there's a show where you're backstage and stuff is going on, you do a really good job of not mentioning names, where so-and-so was doing this, so-and-so was doing that. I saw this going on, but there was also so-and-so who was just, like Wayne Static was just hanging out, drinking a beer, hanging out,
Yeah, again, I just wanted to tell funny, but still insightful stories Again, I could have made it more salacious and said so-and-so was the one doing the coke, or so-and-so was the one with the stripper in the bathroom, or whatever it was. But the stories didn't need that. The stories stood on their own.
Yes.
Or else I wouldn't have told them. And the Corey, the two chapters that Corey figures in, the Slipknot one, which you've mentioned, that happened in front of 10,000 people. So it's not like it was a secret.
True.
And the other story that Corey gets mentioned in, he's not really, doesn't get quoted in it or anything, is the chapter entitled "The Time Our Tour Bus Ran Over a Guy on the New Jersey Turnpike," and I was traveling with Stone Sour, and we clipped a guy in the Jersey Turnpike. He turned out to physically be okay, or if the guy had been maimed or killed, I wouldn't have put it in the book. It wouldn't have been funny then.
No.
I don't know if that makes sense. But,
it does, yeah.
Him being hit and not really getting hurt, that's funny. Him getting crushed, not funny.
And your sense of humor really, like, I can hear you telling these stories as I'm reading the book. Like, I can almost hear your voice and like your sense of humor really shining through a lot of the stuff. And you throw a couple, not really one-liners, but a couple of like extra comments and commentary in there to kind of add to the story too, that really lightens the mood in situations like that.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I wanted. And that when I started sending out some of the chapters for friends to check out, and Corey, the Corey-related chapters I sent to him because he had wanted to check out some of the book before he finished the foreword.
Right.
And I wanted his opinion. I think the guy's a great writer, and he's somebody I know would be honest with me. If he thought it sucked, he would say so.
Right.
And he was like, "This is fucking great. Go with it. This is funnier than shit." He didn't give a shit. He does crazy stuff for a living, and again, there was nothing horrible. He just happened to be almost buck naked on stage, and we got chased off by the Wisconsin State Troopers. But that again, it happened in front of 10,000 people. No big secret.
Right.
I did have some folks reach out to me prior to the book, saying, "Hey, I hear you're writing a book. Boy, hey, was there anything? You remember we were in blah, blah, blah?" And I'm like, "No, it's not in the book. Don't worry."
I was going to ask if there was anything that you're like, maybe not put in the book, or if other people were like, "Can you not put this in there?" type thing, because.
No, nobody said anything. Nobody said, "Don't put that in," or
Gotcha.
I wouldn't put anybody in that position. When I cover anybody, I try and be respectful of their personal lives. If they don't want to talk about personal stuff, we don't talk about personal stuff.
Right.
If they bring it up, then I'll go there. It's very simple. And when I'm on the road, I like to cover things like reporters used to cover the president in the times of like President Eisenhower. When the president was on and this is back when the press corps traveled, by train with the president. And when the president was on the record, he was on the fucking record.
Yeah.
And they would use anything. But the minute he was off the record, that was respected. Nowadays, just everybody gets whatever they can.
That drives me crazy sometimes.
Yeah. And back in those days, Eisenhower, after the day, 6 p.m. hits, the day is done, he'd be at the fucking bar car drinking with those guys. And then maybe he'd give them some off-the-record stuff that they could, as background information. But there was sort of a mutual respect that went on. And that's the kind of thing I try and go for with traveling with people. Yeah, I see a lot of things, but I don't put them on the air.
Right.
It's nobody's fucking business, If the artist wants to bring it up or the artist addresses these things, okay, great, fair game. But if I see things that they don't talk about, then, who the fuck am I to ruin their lives? There's so many other things to talk about. You don't have to be a douchebag about things. At least that's how I think. Yeah,
and I went to journalism school in college. That was the first thing they teach you is, on the record, off the record. And even now during interviews, if somebody says something that, because you get talking sometimes and, conversations happen and sometimes things come out. If I'm not sure, I might sometimes ask, do you want me to leave that out, or are you cool if I leave that in? Do you want that to be off the record? I
do that all of the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, or I'll just sit before we start rolling. It's like, hey, we'll likely cover here, 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 and here. Are you okay talking about this? Are you okay talking about that? If they don't want to talk, they're not going to talk about it. Why would I even bring it up? You know, it would be stupid. Again, and there's a way if you're unsure about a question or about a subject matter that you might want to speak about,
ask before the interview starts.
You ask before the interview starts, or if you're in the middle of it, sometimes you get thrown right into things. You don't have time to ask, or the conversation goes someplace you think it's not going to go. You can ask a related sort of question that's sort of camouflaged, and they'll know what you're talking about. And then if they want to go further down the path to talk about something, they can. But by asking it in sort of a camouflage way, they can give you a non-answer or sort of, not answer the question. They can sort of tiptoe around it, and then not to go there.
Exactly.
It's just the art of conversation. That's really all it is.
And that's what they remember when the interview is over. When you maybe try to set up another one, is a lot of times they remember that. And
actually, again, and that's one of the common questions I get is, how I've managed to get the sort of access I've been really blessed to get. And people are like, well, what's your secret? What's your secret? I'm like, there is no secret. Show up on time.
Yep.
Be polite. Be sober. Be prepared. And that's it.
Common sense.
It's common. You do that all the time. Like my dad used to say, repetition makes reputation. And if you always show up on time and you're always respectful of people and you're always a good guy or gal, you usually land on your feet and get cool stuff. And anyway, it's all, or at least a lot of it, has ended up in this first book. So
awesome. And Lou, I want to thank you so much for taking time today, man. I've really been looking forward to this. This has been outstanding. The new book, Sonic Warrior, out now. Guys, go check it out if you haven't read it. I read it myself in 2 days. Outstanding book. I'll probably read it again a couple times, and can't wait for the next book if that happens. And thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, and I just want to remind folks they can get the print version of the book anywhere you get books, so Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org. If your local bookstore is open, you should definitely get from them. There's a Kindle edition, there's all ebook editions, and of course the audio book, which I narrate myself over 7 hours of crazy stories. So Audible, Google Play, iTunes, wherever you get audiobooks, you can get mine. And I appreciate the support, and thanks so much for having me.